All right, Rajesh Pawar will now be joining us from Kiev to join us with the very latest in terms of all that is going on with the war. Rajesh, if you could just get us up to speed with the latest that is coming in. One breaking news that we just got our viewers a while back on how Russia has increased the frequency of its military sorties over Ukraine, but the US says that it's still not achieved some sort of aerial supremacy. If you could just explain this to our viewers.
See, Russia has been largely using missiles so far. In the war, in these 26 days of war, Russia has largely used missiles. I mean, there were reports from Ukrainian sources and Ukrainian armed forces that they have downed so many aircrafts of Russia. I have not seen a single Russian aircraft in the air in last 27 days. I have been to Mariupol, to Zaporozhye, Dnipro, Kiev. I have not seen the cities under attack. I have not seen Russian aircrafts in the air so far. Yes, missiles, yes, cruise missiles they've used in large numbers, but no aircrafts. As far as air superiority is concerned, I think the air defense systems of Ukraine were destroyed on the very first day of the war. They have been supplied with some Stinger missiles by the West, which are effective largely against helicopters, not so much against the modern aircraft of Russia. Now what Russia has offered to give Ukraine are some old Soviet-era air defense systems. I was very hopeful when President Biden made a statement that US is going to supply 750 air defense systems to Ukraine, and I thought there'll be modern systems like what US has deployed in Poland, like Patriot system. But no, now they have decided to supply things which were lying in storage, unused Soviet-era air defense system to Ukraine, which are largely ineffective against the modern aircraft which Russia has now. So I think Russia has complete air supremacy over Ukraine. It had in last 27 days, and it has it today.
All right, let me also shift focus a little bit, Rajesh, while you're talking about this. We're just flashing that news across our screens also at the moment, and I see our India Today website also carrying this story where Biden has called India's response to Russia-Ukraine war shaky. If you could explain to our viewers what India's stance has been and what prompts the US to say this.
Look, India has always followed a very independent foreign policy, and we have to go by our national interest. Foreign policy is dictated by national interest of a country. What America is doing is in their national interest. What Britain is doing is in their national interest, and what India and China must do should be what is in their national interest. India has made deals with Russia about buying oil now in rubles, probably at a very cheap rate, at a very discounted rate, which is for we are not a very rich country, and our biggest import is oil. And if we can get it at a discounted rate from Russia, we should go for it. That's what I think. And that's what probably America is pointing at, because they want complete isolation of Russia. They are trying to put now sanctions against China as well, because America knows as long as China and India somehow support Russia economically or have economic deals with Russia, their sanctions will not be 100% effective. And only way to put complete pressure on Russia is if they're cut off from everyone, including China and India. I think that is the reason for this American statement.
Yes, very interesting to get that particular perspective. And, you know, Rajesh, you have put it out there. India will work in its own interest, and our stance is going to be in line with our interests first. That's very well said. Also, if you could get us a bird's eye view of what is going on across Ukraine right now, including Kiev and Mariupol specifically, and show us some visuals of where you are standing by in Kiev right now as well.
If you can see, this is one of the central areas in Kiev, just about a kilometer from main train station where I am right now. And I'm showing it to you from my hotel window because it's a total curfew today. And not a single soul, not a single automobile is outside here in the city. And we, like, the Ukrainian government sent SMS to the citizens. I just received a SMS at 6:15 local time saying that all citizens must take shelter because air raids are expected soon. But we haven't heard any kind of explosion or any kind of attacks till now. It's been half an hour.
Yes,
and coming to Mariupol,
go on. You were talking about Mariupol as well.
Yes. Mariupol is a humanitarian catastrophe in the true sense. 200,000 civilians stuck there between the two forces. The Ukrainian army is bombarding areas held by Russians, and Russian army is bombarding areas held by the Ukrainians still, which is very small in some pockets only. But it is the common people in that area who are suffering, whose lives have totally been destroyed. The city is under siege now for almost 9 days. No water, no electricity, no gas, no supplies. So you can understand the kind of situation this civilian people must be going through there.
Catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic for the people of Mariupol, and an absolute humanitarian crisis.
Even UN agencies have said they are not able to take any kind of humanitarian aid inside Mariupol city. So it's a total humanitarian disaster. It's a catastrophe in terms of humanitarian angle. These people have nothing over there, and they're being fired upon from both the sides, and it is really, really tragic.
One can only sit here and imagine what those people must be going through, Rajesh, and you stay safe as well. But, now let's talk a little about those peace talks that we've been talking about. 4 rounds of talks that took place did not yield any result. Then you had that point plan that both the nations really came up with, conditional one, that Ukraine will not become a part of NATO, and in exchange there will be ceasefire announced by Russia. Where does one stand on that one? It's been days that has happened.
Look, Ukraine had no choice. The NATO nations and America said right now they're not ready to take Ukraine in NATO. So if they have said this, if Zelensky is saying that we do not want to join NATO, after that has no meaning, doesn't make any sense. And they have said that instead of joining NATO, we need security guarantees from China, from Russia, from America, that their sovereignty will be protected in future as well. But this is not the only contentious issue with Russia. Russia also wants some kind of agreement on Crimea, being a part of Russia, and Russia wants Ukraine to accept independence of Donetsk Republic and of Lugansk Republic, which Ukraine has not softened their stand on, and they have not made any statements in that regard. And that is where I think the whole thing is stuck. And if there is a middle path, then only there can be any kind of solution on this. Till then, it will not move forward.
And it's also very interesting to note Zelensky's stance vis-a-vis NATO, saying either accept us or you go ahead and admit your fear of Russia.
Look, NATO has been very, very clear, NATO and America, that they will help Ukraine, they will supply equipment, they will help them in every possible way, but they will not get into direct confrontation with Russia. They will not put boots on ground in Ukraine. No, they will not fire on Russian aircrafts, because Ukraine has been pushing these countries to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine. They have flatly refused that. They've agreed to supply systems, but what Ukraine wants, they have not been able to get the military aircraft. Poland offered MiG-29, but not to Ukraine, to America, and then told America to give it to Ukraine. It got stuck there. Yeah. Now, Biden said we'll supply 750 air defense systems to Ukraine, but now what they've decided to give is old Soviet-era air defense systems which are in storage.
Yeah.
That has no meaning. The modern aircraft which Russia has, these anti-aircraft systems will be totally ineffective against them. So what actually Ukraine is getting, nothing substantial with which they can sustain this conflict in a positive way. They are not getting that. So I feel that Zelensky realizes this now, that he has been left alone, and he probably will not be able to sustain this conflict for too long.
Yeah.
And that is the reason that his stance is softening up.
And yes, you say the stance is softening up because they might not be able to sustain this for too long, this particular conflict. But so far, their resistance have been quite impeccable. If you had to speak of the resistance even today, 4 weeks into the war, and even today, what kind of resistance is Ukraine showing against a mighty Russia? And where do things stand as far as that's concerned?
Look, I totally agree with you. The resistance stays. It is not because of the equipment supplied by NATO or anything else. It is the spirit of the people. Ukrainians today are united, and the kind of spirit I see in them, it's amazing. They said they will fight till the end. Everybody is willing to pick up the arms against the invading army. And that is amazing spirit, which when you interact with people here, it's really impressive. But on the other side, if you see, if they do not have modern weapons, they just cannot sustain it for too long. How long a spirit, just by the spirit, the fighting spirit, people will be able to fight such a mighty army if they do not have the adequate weaponry, if they do not have the latest systems which NATO promised them, they will not be able to sustain it for too long.
Absolutely. And as far as the other cities outside of, you mentioned what happened in Kiev, you mentioned where Mariupol stands. What about the other cities in Ukraine? How are they holding fort and what's going on, if you have any inputs on that front as well? Because I understand you're in Kiev right now.
Look, the Russian strategy, which seems to me, is that you go capturing as much of territory, as much of landmass as possible in the west and south of Ukraine, which they have already done. They have advanced almost very close to River Dnipro, and the entire area to the east and south of it, the countryside, is under Russian occupation now. And they have not faced any resistance. I think on the other side, the Ukrainian strategy is that leave the countryside because they cannot fight pitched battles in open against the Russians, who also have air supremacy in the area, and it would be foolish to fight pitched battles in open countryside when Russians enjoy the air superiority. What I think their strategy is to focus on the cities. They have gone inside the cities and have decided to fight Russians when they enter the cities. And Russia so far, except for Kherson and Mariupol, has avoided that.
Also, you know, there's an update that a UNGA emergency special session on Ukraine is going to resume tomorrow. Do you have any expectations from the United Nations at this point?
See, United Nations is trying its best. I mean, they have not given statements like China has tried to raise biological weapon issue in United Nations Security Council, and they said they will be investigating this because America has been caught red-handed in this. They are biological labs operating in Ukraine with American assistance, and China is not letting go of this matter. They are trying to raise this matter again and again in United Nations Security Council to pin America down. America is talking of some kind of sanctions against certain entities in China about Uyghur issue, which is of no consequence in today's scenario. Also, there are tough talking about India now in US. And also at the same time, they say they do not want to sever their diplomatic relationship with Russia because they want to continue talking. So mixed signals everywhere. It is, let's wait and watch what's going to happen in United Nations General Assembly or Security Council next.
So what are the different options and different ways in which this war could probably end? The most obvious in-your-face one, of course, is the fact that Ukraine decides not to go with NATO, and in exchange, Russia announces ceasefire. That's the most obvious one. But are there any other ways in which this war could end?
Look, the biggest player in this war is America. If America wants, this war can stop pretty soon. But if they keep putting fuel to the fire by supplying weapons and making all these inflammatory remarks, the conflict will keep going on. Ukraine has basically entered this war depending on the support from NATO and America and European countries. If they somehow pressurize Ukraine as well to come to the negotiating table and maybe talk to Russia and increase the diplomacy, maybe they will also soften their stance, and that's the only way this war can end. Otherwise, it will later on, even after Russia occupies large landmass here, it will change into a civil war, a guerrilla warfare everywhere, and this country will suffer more after that, and it will be like ruins everywhere. And there'll be no country like to govern, which Zelensky is trying to govern later on. If all this carries on, what he is going to rule after that, I don't understand that.
Right, Rajesh, I request you to stay on with us. Rajesh, be with us. Rajesh is our soldier reporter who is getting us all the very latest on this front. Don't go anywhere. We also have Elnar Benazarov joining us live from Moscow. Elnar, if you could tell us Russia's stance at this point of time, what are you hearing from the echo chambers as far as any kind of announcement of ceasefire is concerned? Because just look at the humanitarian crisis that Ukraine is going through at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, we don't have any signs that ceasefire could be reached, although we know, and yesterday we've learned that the Russian Human Rights Watch or the ombudsman Tatiana Maskalkova, she claimed that Russia is ready for the first exchange of war prisoners, of detainees with Ukraine. And there are 500 names in the first list for exchange with Ukraine. If that could be reached, that would be the first humanitarian exchange of that scale. Although we know that on 16th of March, there was the first exchange of war prisoners when 9 Russian soldiers were exchanged for the head of Ukrainian city of Melitopol. So we just see that Russia and Ukraine can agree on some issues regarding these humanitarian corridors. For example, as we know, as yesterday the Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk of Ukraine, she announced that more than 8,000 people could leave Mariupol and other cities of Ukraine through these humanitarian corridors. And we know that Russian Ministry of Defense accused Kiev that Kiev is not allowing people of Ukraine to leave, and that in Mariupol, for example, the combatants of Azov nationalist battalion, that they are leaving pretending to be civilians. So we know that these accusations still continue, but we see that Russia and Ukraine have some practical progress on these steps, giving this exchange of war prisoners or the humanitarian corridors for Mariupol and some other cities in Ukraine.
Absolutely. Also, Elnar, if you could explain to us the sentiment amongst the common civilians right there in Russia as Putin's army continues to attack civilians in Ukraine, and that's a war crime.
Yes, you know, there's like common statement that during 21st day you could just get used to something. So I can say that Moscovians, I'm right now in Moscow, they are pretty got used to this, we call it military operation since it's offense in Russia to call it otherwise. So I can say that Russians and Moscovians, they are getting used to the closure of McDonald's, for example, to the closure of Western companies and Western shops in Moscow. But we see that the fear is growing, and we see that, for example, currently some of my friends, they can't find some Western medications, especially to cure their hormonal diseases. They can find insulin, and they're trying to find it in Belarus, in Georgia, in neighboring countries, because in Moscow pharmacies you can't find it easily and have to wait for at least 3 weeks because of the logistics. It's not because of sanctions, but because of logistics and because of this use we have on the border of Poland and Belarus. So some people don't reach to their medication, and this is like the first and the most the worst sign that we see of this expel of Western companies from Moscow. And among other population, I don't see that people in calamity. So I see that people have relatively calm situation, and maybe that's temporary. That's not for sure will last long. But as for now, we don't see that Russian economy is getting into recession. We see that many Russians are still living the same life as they lived before the 24th of February. But many of them
aren't the sanctions impacting them at all?
Sanctions are impacting, but we see it's mostly in the panic between the older population who remembers the 90s when the Soviet Union split. So we see that many people are currently in queues in Russian shops trying to find more sugar, because there were rumors that there is no enough of sugar and scarce of sugar in Russia. And this is why we saw that people were standing in queues and even fighting for sugar. And in Russian city of Kherson, we saw yesterday that a man was accused for selling more than 50 kilos of sugar. And we know that this scarcity is also have seen in the floor, and we see it that Russian Ministry of Trade and Agriculture announced that there is no scarcity and no need to buy so much sugar, and it even became a meme among Russians. And we see that Western companies are leaving Russia, especially IKEA and some cloths. And we saw that in oil industry, we also have seen the companies leaving Russian market. But many Russians still believe that these companies will return back as soon as the situation became more stable.
All right, Elnar, thanks for that input right there. He's joining us with all the very latest from Russia. We're going to leave it at that, but we'll slip into a very short commercial break and continue getting you all the very latest on what is happening on day 27 of Putin's invasion. The visuals on your screen show massive explosion across Ukraine, the aftermath of the war. We're continuing our continuous relentless reporting on this story. Stay with us. This and more in just about a bit.